What's up YouTube, Jay here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about two completely different image formats, why they exist and the differences between them, as well as some pros and cons. So this video is going to be very much an informational video as opposed to a how-to video, which a lot of my other videos are how-to videos, but this is really going to be a building block video for a future video on how to use the Inkscape editor, which you can see right here, the Inkscape editor. I want to make a video on how to create images and how to use the Inkscape editor, but first I think it's important to understand the difference between raster images and vector images. And with that, we'll go ahead and hop into the video. So a raster image is an image that uses pixels to store color information, as opposed to a vector image, which uses math to store color information. And let's take a look at what this means. So over here, I've got Microsoft Paint, fairly common editing program. Lots of memes have been made with it. Lots of memes have been made about it. And as you can see on the left, we've got this grid of pixels, and I can color in these pixels, and that's how a raster image stores color values. It stores it in pixels. And on the right, we have, this is an SVG, which is a specific format for vector graphics. And we can see here that this image is being rendered from this math on the left. So we've got some metadata up here, metadata down here, talking about like the width of this image or document or page, whatever you want to call it. And then right here, we've got a rectangle with a height of 50, a width of 50, the X position's 10, the Y position's 10. So we can see this math, and then we have the color here. We can see this math is determining the pixel colors here. And we can also do circles and lines, and there's various different things you can do in SVG specifically, but we'll show, here's an example of a square, a circle, a line. Obviously, it just looks like gibberish, but you can create nice looking things from this math. And then on the left, we can also create squares, lines, whatnot. So let's go back to talk about some of the pros and cons. JPEG, PNG, a GIF, and TIFF are all raster images, also sometimes referred to as bitmap images. And then SVG, which is the specific format we were looking at, AI, not artificial intelligence, but I think it stands for Adobe Illustrator, EPS, and some PDFs are vector images. So raster is great for photographs and things with lots of unique colors. It's good for standard file formats for uploading. So say you're uploading an avatar to a website, you're probably going to upload it as a JPEG or a PNG. And ultimately, images, even vector images, when they're displayed on a monitor, are actually, they have to be rasterized before they're displayed on a monitor. Because a monitor is actually, just a grid of pixels like this is. Obviously, the pixels are a lot smaller in the monitor, but the monitor is just a grid of pixels like this. So even an SVG or a vector graphics image has to be rasterized to be displayed in pixels. That's the reason that raster is great for photographs, is because the way that a digital camera captures a picture is, a digital camera has a sensor like this with lots of different cells that detect the red, green, blue light that's coming in on the rays. And when you take that picture, it captures the specific values for each pixel and records it as a raster image. So that's why raster is good for photographs. Some cons of raster images is typically once an object is rasterized, it typically can't be edited again. And what do I mean by this? If I create a square here, right now I can move it around and edit it. When I save it, this is actually, it gets rasterized and saved as part of the image, as opposed to with SVG, this would be saved as math and we could edit again, just like we saw with this example here. I can change to, let's say, 100, run that. Now my square is taller. Before it was 50 pixels, now it's 100. Once something gets rasterized, it kind of loses the concept of a square. This is no longer a rectangle. It's now just lots of pixel values here. And the same with this line, like I can't click into this line and move it. Whereas over here, I could actually update that line because of the way that the SVG specifically is saved. Another con of raster is that when you zoom in onto a raster image, it gets pixelized. And now let's talk about vector. So vector, as opposed to being good for photographs, vector is good for icons, logos, line art, things that have minimal colors, maybe 2 or 3 colors. It can be used for more colors, but once you start getting into like hundreds and thousands of colors like a photograph would have, that's got no business really in vector. And the reason it's good for icons, logos, and line art is because often simple logos are just collections of lines pointing at each other. And actually, I've got a logo that I created the other night as SVG. We could pop in here. So, if you think about this, it's just a line, a line, a line, a line, a line, a line. And it's a lot of lines. But that brings us perfectly into the next point, I believe, which is, no pixelization when zoomed in, and vector can have smaller file sizes. So if we look at this, let's look at an example of zooming in and looking at this pixelization. So here we have an SVG, a vector graphic of this skate, and when we zoom in, we're not seeing any pixelization. I feel like I'm using the wrong word there, but you get the idea. Whereas if I click into this PNG, which is a raster image, and when I zoom in to about the same zoom level, you can already see some pixelization happening here. And as I zoom in even more, I mean, you can tell this is obviously pixels that are being stored. And, we can solve that issue of the pixelization by increasing the number of pixels in the image. So this one here, you can see is 512 pixels by 512 pixels. This is 1024 pixels by 1024 pixels. This one's 2048 pixels by 2048 pixels. So if I click into this, as I zoom in, you're not seeing the pixelization. Eventually, once I zoom in, you will see the pixelization, but depending on the size of the image, it may not be noticeable. However, the file size is drastically different. So this SVG of the skate is 5 kilobytes. The 2048 one, which is the one that you can zoom in the most on, is 125 kilobytes, which is massive difference. What's that, like 25 times as big? Yeah, this image is 25 times as large as this one. And at the end of the day, it's still a small image, but over time, it all adds up. So that talks about no pixelization when zoomed in. To a degree, you can create larger pixel count images, but then you increase the file size. Another pro of vector is that objects are saved as math and can typically be edited after the fact. Like we talked about here, once this line gets saved, that line is there, and the metadata about where that start point and end point is lost. It's just pixels at this point. Whereas with SVG, it's just math. So I can come in here, I can edit the start point of the line and the end point of the line. Let's say we want this to end at the bottom right corner, which is 300 width, 300 height. Currently, the X ends at 300 here. The Y ends at 150. If we increase this to 300, then it'll end in the bottom right hand corner. We can edit this. I will say that you're not typically going to be editing SVG by hand, but you'll be using a tool like Inkscape, which is an SVG editor. So here we have this rectangle here. This is the same kind of rectangle as this red one here. It's just this one's in an editing program. So I can click it. I can move it around, and actually this rectangle is grouped with this text, but you get the idea. And we have our line, we have our circle, we have our rectangle. We can also put text in here, and if I run this, here we have our text, cool SVG. Let me write some text over here. Let's write cool SVG, make it wider, and save it. Oh, but wait, I misspelled cool. Can I go in there into the text and edit it after the fact? With raster, this is no longer text at all. This is just pixel colors. So I can't go in and fix it. Whereas in SVG, let's say I meant to spell cool with 3 O's. I can update it on the fly like that because this is just text and math. Over here, I can't go in and edit that after the fact. Of course, I can go in and erase it and rewrite it, or could have erased as a whole, but I guess this shouldn't be writing cool SVG on a raster image, but whatever. And that erasing works fine, but imagine if I had a background. I would not only be erasing the cool SVG, I would also be erasing the background. So one thing I like about SVG specifically, there's other vector graphics outside of SVG, but what I like about SVG specifically is it's just text-based, which means the editing program can look at the text and say, hey, here's all the rectangles. You can move them around independently after the fact, which actually, let me show another example. So when I create my YouTube thumbnails, I actually use Inkscape, and here we go. So this was a thumbnail for one of my recent videos. If I want to create a new thumbnail, I can just duplicate this, and then I can change the text, add a new picture, change the picture of me. I can move these things around after the fact. And I haven't touched this image or this file in a couple months, but I can still pop in here and I can use the previous thumbnails as templates, which I really like that about vector graphics. Great for making templates. And then because these are saved as text files, the vector graphics, you can often write programs to interact with them or to animate them. And you can animate each object independent from others. I don't have an example of that right now, but it's doable. Now let's talk about some cons of vector. One con is that some platforms might not support SVG uploads. So let's say you're trying to upload a thumbnail to YouTube. I haven't actually tried to upload an SVG thumbnail to YouTube, but maybe I will and post it down here, you know, somewhere over here. But I'm pretty sure YouTube's not going to support SVG for a thumbnail. And another con of Vector is it's not good for photographs for reasons mentioned before. The way that a digital camera sensor works is it captures in raster. So raster, good for photographs, vector, good for line art, logos, icons, that type of thing. And with that said, I think that's it for this video. In one of my next videos, I'll be walking through the Inkscape editor, which is specifically an SVG or scalable vector graphics editor. And I really like Inkscape. I feel like the learning curve is a little steep, so I want to make a video for people getting started with Inkscape to avoid some of the difficulty I had, and I would really like to be able to recommend Inkscape to friends, but it's kind of hard without reference material to help them get started with Inkscape, so that's going to be the purpose of my next video. If you found this video helpful and would like more people to see it, hit the thumbs up so that it'll be recommended to others. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, or most likely more programming content in the future, be sure to subscribe, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below. That's it, and have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.